Hello everyone, I am Jonathan Little, and in today's video we are taking a look at a wild hand from the Cash Game World Championship that took place recently on CoinPoker. Today we're featuring a hand with Riggedeck, who is a good, strong, world-class player, and The Rock, who unfortunately for The Rock happened to be the biggest loser in the Cash Game World Championship. They are playing 50, 100 with a $200 straddle, with a $100 ante, $24,000 deep effective. In a 3-blind game, it is very important that you play a somewhat cautious strategy from the small blind, because unlike a regular cash game, when it folds around to you in the small blind, you only have to worry about the big blind. Now, though, you have to worry about 2 players. And with a hand like pocket twos, which is what The Rock has when they fold to him, he probably wants to just limp, because if you limp the pocket twos, you can easily call a raise and see the flop. The problem, though, is if you raise to any amount, if you get 3-bet, it's already quite nasty because you're going to have a really tough time proceeding post-flop unless you make exactly a set, especially if it goes 3 ways. The Rock, though, raises to 400, a minimum raise. And I don't like this play at all, because essentially it is going to result in both players calling or re-raising pretty much every time. Now, maybe you get Riggedeck to fold out some of the weakest hands, but you have to realize the player in the big blind has to put in 200 more to try to win, how much, 1,000? They shouldn't fold anything. And in general, when you're deep stacked, you don't want your opponent sticking around with anything, because especially if they play well, they're going to be able to make you under-realize your equity because you're out of position. And for example, say it comes 9-8-4, and The Rock bets, and someone calls, and the turn is any other card besides a 2. If The Rock checks and faces a bet, it's already pretty rough, right? And pocket twos could easily be the best hand, but it can't really withstand pressure unless it does make exactly a set. So anyway, the pocket twos I would have limped, but The Rock min raises. Riggedeck with queen 10 in the big blind, which is the middle blind here, opts to call. This is really the only option, I think. You could 3-bet every once in a while if you felt inclined, but it's certainly not necessary. Folding would be too tight for a min raise. The straddle is going to call or re-raise every time. Flop comes ace, king, jack, all clubs. This is an interesting board because normally when the player in the small blind raises here, they should be raising with mostly a good, strong, linear range of high cards. Maybe some middle pairs, maybe some good suited connectors. But on ace, king, jack, it's actually very hard for the Rock to have exactly a flush because they can't have the ace high flush or the king high flush or the jack high flush, right? Sure, they can have some of the lower ones, but they may not even raise those to begin with. And they probably won't play hands like 8-2 of clubs, right? Whereas the player in the straddle may actually defend, closing the action with the 8-2 of clubs, or almost any suited hand in a game with an ante and no rake, facing a min raise with another player in the pot. Also, Riggedeck's range should contain a whole lot of good, strong, high cards and middle cards, because they called the preflop raise, right? They will fold out their weakest hands, but they're going to have a lot of high cards that just simply aren't going to fold to a bet. So I think in this scenario, the Rock should actually check a ton of the time, perhaps with their entire range. When you are first to act in a 3-way pot, even if you were the preflop raiser, if the flop connects somewhat well with your opponent's ranges, you need to check a ton. That said, this is the spot where the Rock goes for a bet, half pot. And while I just said I would have checked everything, this hand, specifically pocket twos, actually does benefit from getting some hands like pocket fours to fold. Or also, if you check and face a bet, well, you'd have to fold this hand, right? But if you bet and get called, every once in a while you make a flush or improve to a set, and you end up winning the pot. So if there is a, call it non-logical hand to bet, I think this is one of them, because it does get some better hands to fold, and it results in you not getting bluffed quite as often. Queen 10. Now opts to call from Riggedeck. And you may say, shouldn't queen 10 raise? It flopped this straight. It came ace, king, jack, and you have queen 10. And the answer is no. Because when you raise and happen to play a humongous pot, you could easily be crushed. Also, you have to recognize that the player in the straddle could also be sitting here with a very good hand, like a flush. And when you are playing very deep stack, they are effectively 100, call it 40 big blinds deep, accounting for the straddle. You have to be somewhat cautious, at least on the early betting rounds, multi-way. So I like the call here from Riggedeck. Straddle folds, and we are going to head to the turn. Turn is the 3 of spades. I mean, at this point, I think the rock should probably just check and fold, unless they decide to get frisky. Once the rock checks, though, Riggedeck definitely needs to bet. And when you are betting in this scenario, you're essentially saying, I have a good, strong made hand, right? Because if you had a medium strength hand, you'd rather just check and not ever face a check raise. Like imagine Riggedeck did have a random ace, right? This is a spot where, yeah, an ace is probably good, but if you bet and get raised, it's miserably tough to play. So for that reason, you want to check back a lot of the medium strength hands. You're going to want to be betting very polarized, meaning you want to be betting your best made hands and some draws. Draws would be hands containing a queen of clubs, maybe a 10 of clubs, and I presume that's about it. So queen 10 that goes for the bet. Now, the rock has to ask, do I want to have any check raises in this situation facing the big bet? And when you are very deep stacked, as they are, quite often the answer is yes. So, assuming the rock wants to check raise, presumably with mostly flushes, which hands make good bluffing candidates? Well, it's going to be hands that can get better hands to fold, right? That also ideally have some equity. As you get deeper and deeper and deeper stacked, you'll find that you usually want to favor bluffs that have some equity compared to bluffs with no equity. So, in this situation, the rock opts to check raise the pocket twos. And I don't mind this because notice here, the rock can get some hands like a random weak flush draw to fold. Also, if the Riggedeck was going for a bet with an ace, which again, I don't think is necessarily a great play, this puts that type of hand in a really, really nasty spot. So this is a cool scenario where I think a lot of people just auto fold, but if you study GTO solver outputs, you will find in scenarios like this, the low and middle pairs with a club will bluff some portion of the time, and Riggedeck found it. Queen 10 certainly cannot fold. While you could be crushed, you also could be crushing, as is the case. Whenever you are likely now way ahead or way behind, you should almost never re-raise. In spots like this, when you get check raised on the turn, the rock is essentially saying, I have a flush or nothing, right? And if they have a flush or nothing, well, Queen 10's a bluff catcher. All right, river is the queen. The pot is 12,800. Riggedeck has 1.5x pot remaining. What would you do in this scenario with the pocket twos? Take a second. Think about it. Let me know in the comment section down below. The board is ace, king, jack, 3, queen. Any 10s a straight. There are flushes available. This is a tough one, but I think the right play is to go all in. You may say, well, your opponent has a straight. You're probably going to get called and you're going to lose. True. But you have to realize, in this situation, it's kind of hard for your opponent to have a straight, and it's kind of hard for them to have a flush. Although, if they are betting very polarized on the turn, maybe that's not necessarily true. Because if they're only betting, let's say, sets and better on the turn, well, they're going to have a lot of straights and flushes in that range, right? So, this is a spot where if your opponent's range contains a whole lot of hands like 2 pair, then I love a big bet because you're really, really, really trying to get those to fold. And I'm not even sure a smaller bet will get the job done. Like say you do half potted here. Depending on how the rock normally plays, which I'm going to presume is kind of aggressive because they played the twos this way, I don't even think 2 pairs are going to fold. So I think the only way you're going to reasonably get a hand like 2 pair to fold in the spot is to go all in. Also, if you do go all in, you're basically saying I have a flush or maybe a straight or nothing. And if your opponent does have a random 10, now they're calling to only effectively get half the pot some chunk of the time. It doesn't exactly work like that because you will be bluffing sometimes with a hand like the twos. So it's not exactly a scenario where they're calling for only half the pot because whenever you're bluffing, they get a lot. But that is something to be aware of, right? They don't just get the whole pot when they call in win every time. So in this situation, given the rock does have the random junk flush blocker and the board are not like this, I think all in is going to be the right play the majority of the time. Unless they have a very crazy image. And if you have a very crazy image, then you got to chill out. The rock instead, though, goes half pot. And I think this is where the rock went really wrong in this hand. Pre-flop, I probably would have limped it, whatever. Raising's fine. On the flop, I probably would have checked, but whatever. Betting's okay. If you're going to bet, this is an okay hand to do it with. On the turn, if you want to find a check raise bluff, this is a reasonable one. But then on the river, if you're going to bet, you simply must go all in. Because when you bet half pot, you make it very, very easy for your opponent to call with any straight or better for sure. And also, I think even 2 pairs going to find a call for half pot, especially if the rock is thought to be on the aggressive side. Now, queen 10 in this scenario has an easy call. Some people think, oh, I have a straight, I should go all in. No, 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 no. If you go all in here, you're going to get called by straights and flushes, which is really, really bad. Queen 10 has a trivially easy call. You can't go around folding, especially for half pot. And Riggedeck scoops a massive pot. Wild hand, fun hand. I liked it. If you enjoyed this hand, let me know in the comment section down below. Click the like and subscribe button while you're down there. Good luck in your games. Have fun. And when you decide to represent the nuts, put them all in.